So this episode coming up, everybody, we had my big brother, Dr. Vernon Mitchell. Brother is a professor at Washington University, Mizzou grad. So I know Matt's, pumping his fist stuff in that on that side. Cornell graduate as well, got his Ph.D. at Cornell. Insightful dude, man. I mean, he teaches African American studies, religious studies, and American studies at WashU. Y'all gonna really enjoy this one. We're gonna bring him back again. We know everybody's going through what they're going through right now, with not just the pandemic and the rioting, not even rioting. I say uprising. I like more uprising. I don't like rioting. Uprising, revolution, uprising.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's the right way to look at that, because there's a lot of different tones to take on. There's a lot of people that are in different approaches to this. A lot of people that are doing different things in order to support it. And I think that's why it was so important to us today to bring Vernon in, because Vernon can kind of be that undercurrent to that understanding. I'm a big believer in saying that if you're anywhere that you're gonna head, you need to know where you came from. And Vernon's one of the people I look to for that, especially to be a contemporary who truly embraces it. So he's gonna talk a little bit about, his journey, what kind of collected that knowledge, what that meant for him. But we're also gonna talk about a lot of the different things that I think that are important looking at the issues that we have at hand and how there's so many different players that go into it. So we're going to do this today. Obviously, we've got a couple of other people in the pipeline that we think that add a little bit more flavor to this conversation from a few different angles as well over the next couple of weeks. But the thing we're not going to do is just abandon the fact that we also, we always want to entertain you as well.
Yeah, we don't want it. We don't make every one episode being an ABC after school special. We don't want to. We don't want to do that.
Yeah, because we think I really think there's a place for that, because in order to keep that same energy, to keep your energy up, you got to be able to have a reprieve too, and that's what I'm saying. We try to be a smart reprieve.
I've been sending tweets to OJ, man, because did you see? I know you saw OJ's sit down. Literally, he was sitting down. No, I had somebody on the camera.
OJ works a different way.
OJ was on some like, yo, I'm just saying this is wrong. I'm like, really, OJ? Like,
dollar late, glove too late, too soon. But we got the opposite. We got the opposite. Yeah. OJ joining in, man. So enjoy this episode, man, with Dr. Brother.
Yeah, Dr. Brother Vernon Mitchell. All right. All right, welcome to another edition of the Scenario Remix. We have a special guest. He's been on the Straight Out Low Cash version of the show, but this is a little bit more different. It's that same fun, just a little bit different. Fully a doctor now. Last time he had just finished doctoral. Actually, last time is right after you got your doctoral, when Prince died, and we did the podcast with Prince. Yep. The doctor, my big brother, Dr. Vernon Mitchell, man. Thank you for coming on, man.
Oh man, blessings and peace, man. Glad to be here with you, brother.
So before we get to the ministry that I know that V's gonna bring to us here, let's talk about oh God, what was this, like 17 years ago now, maybe? God, 16, 17 years ago, when Vernon attempted to talk the police out of taking me up the street to Boone County when we was in college because of a fight that broke out at a party.
Hold on, is this the same incident where you made Adonis?
Yes, it is. So there was a hurricane of activity going on after this AKA fashion show. But somehow Vernon was like Magneto. Like nobody was messing with him. He had like a force field around him, and he was going through, getting people to calm down, diffusing it. And there wasn't a whole lot of diffusing with me at that point in life. And then Vernon came over to the cops, was like, oh, hold on, man, y'all didn't have to do him like that. Now that's a little extra. He could have let me have some words with, I'm right. Completely different than they looked at me. It was like they turned around and looked into the eyes of Jesus or something. Like, oh, man, we don't want any trouble with you, but we gotta take him. He was wilding. Vernon tried. He tried.
This is the funny thing is that we're connecting stories. This long story of the paddy wagon is gonna be connected. Hopefully we can just get different guests that connect that whole night over time.
It's like the Hangover 4.
On 5.
It's like Leonard. What was it? Leonard Part 6.
Yeah, Leonard 6.
Part 9.
Yeah. Oh,
we just skipped the first 5. They classify still. We just go straight to that part.
It's like the director's cut.
Thanks for doing this for us, man.
Yeah, man.
When I was looking at what was going on, and I reached out to Daryl about it. I say, man, this is it. It's time to get Vernon in the game now because he gonna have.
We've
that
been talking
perspective
about it
that
for
we
like
need
3-4 months, maybe even longer. He's like, but we got to get it right time. When
right
is the
now.
right time?
Yeah, no, the time is always right to talk about righteousness and justice, man.
I hear
Always,
that.
always, man.
So
And
give
that's
your
not a
official
soundbite either. I'm just.
give your official position for everybody at WashU for people kind of can know and check you out.
I am faculty in the program for American Culture Studies. Lecturer there. Taught in the Danforth Center for Religion and Politics this past semester. And also have kind of an administrative capacity in the university libraries, working with
Because you're a researching
most of the
motherfucker, though,
outreach.
boy. You're a researching motherfucker, boy. That dude Vernon,
Not as much as I'd like.
he took a trip to DC. I was like, oh man, you going to to Love? He's like, nah, I'm going to the Library of Congress. I was like, oh, that's some different type of trip to DC.
Yeah. No, it was definitely at that time. I think I was finishing up. I was doing research for my dissertation, so I was
They call
But
Vernon.
I may or may not have gone to Love when I was there though.
Oh no, no. That wasn't the main point. You may have looped back around.
They call Vernon in as part of the ribbon cutting for the Smithsonian Museum.
And then he had Park Avenue.
I wish.
And then he had Park Avenue right afterwards.
Yeah, I know Park Avenue. Wow, you took it back.
I think it's still open, isn't it?
I don't know.
Yeah. I don't think.
I hope nothing's open right now, but just like in theory.
Yeah, in
theory.
Pre-quarantine, it was open.
one of Vernon's chapter brothers and one of my good homeboys down in Atlanta was telling me about how they opened the club up and they was having like VIP sections for like an hour for like $300. You get a bottle for an hour or like 3 other people, and I was just like, some places still gonna kick it. They okay.
Hold on, that doesn't make any sense though. Like, so what was the normal price for VIP?
I don't know. I think they're just trying to get them bottles offhand. You know, everybody's trying to unload it. Like the black community has condensed itself into some very tight knit areas. We got to get these discount deals off. Actually, I got some liquor in the car. I got to go get. I saw some discounts this morning when I was shopping, but neither here nor there, man. So,
let's start your story though, man. So, because you went to Mizzou, I know me and you had a long conversation about how you end up, because you was supposed to go to Tuskegee at first, right?
Man, it's we're gonna put it all out there.
This is your story.
I don't.
I ain't gonna put you out there. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no. So, yeah, I had accepted a full scholarship to Tuskegee. Was actually planning on attending. I had a cousin that was an upperclassman that was there. Looking forward to it, and they rescinded my scholarship. Gave me like, I don't know, maybe like a quarter of what they originally had intended. And the day we were supposed to drive down to go visit, my dad was like, let's go see about Mizzou. And I did. And when I was there, I ended up running into Christine Winfield, Julian Winfield's mom.
Yeah.
And she was like a blessing to me and so many other Black students, man. She was our mother she was our mother at Mizzou. And she, along with 100 Black men, put together an amazing package for me, and I went to school virtually free. And the funny thing is, the first day that I decided to move into, moving in day or whatever, I got the mail came, and it was a letter from Tuskegee saying, "Oh, there was a mistake. You were supposed to, we were supposed to get the full scholarship that we had promised initially." And I kind of took that as a sign, like, you know what? I'm gonna see what Columbia is talking about. And then I found out that a bunch of people that I had known, like through athletics and academics, were actually going to Mizzou. So I didn't feel as though I was alone. You know what I'm saying? There, so a lot of people from the Suburban North Conference that I knew, and folks that were, coming from Lutheran North and Corner Ritter. A lot of Chicago folks were there at Kansas City. And
Whole lot of Chicago folks.
Oh man,
Always.
the Whitney Young crew, that they had a direct funnel,
Yeah, Whitney Young was a big funnel to Mizzou. Yep.
Yeah, so it was great, man. And while I still wonder at times what it would have been like to have gone to Tuskegee, man. I don't resent my experience at Mizzou. Yes, I know Matt. So it's I'm not bitter about any of that stuff. I believe in and support HBCUs. They need to always be here as long as there's America. There needs to be HBCUs. But I would also say that our Black folks, our nuanced experiences, like one of the things, I'll tell you why I went to Mizzou. I was walking my father. We were in Memorial Union, and they had a picture of these brothers, these Black men who were laying stones in what would become the Memorial Union. Mm-hmm. And when I was thinking about where I wanted to go to school and me kind of being how I am, I was like, man, I'm going to go to this school for all the Black folks who paid taxes. This is a land grant institution. But, they paid taxes to this institution, but yet they nor their descendants could attend this institution.
Right.
And that's that. I start kind of wrap myself in my own resistance, I guess, in some ways. I don't want to say wokeness because that gets too cliche.
I think that's the right angle for wokeness, though, because at the age that you're at and you're looking at that, that's an advanced level of assessing what it is that you want from it. You know what I'm saying? Because that was kind of the thing that I looked at with HBCUs when I was in high school, because they were some of the only schools that were really making their presence be known at my school, so it's just kind of interesting to me that you kind of landed up at Mizzou that way, because I ended up at Mizzou in an indirect path too. But when you get there and you get that sense of community, when you're at that PWI, and I can't remember who we were talking to, Daryl, about this not too long ago on the show, but it was, when you get there, it's like a small community within a much larger community that really looks out after itself. Like when you talk about Miss Winfield and you talk about things like the Student Success Center and academic retention and things like that, like there's really places that look out for people and have older students that just look out for the younger ones in general. So it's a unique environment. And I'm sure there's other PWIs that are like that, but even if your path wasn't meant to land there, you still can find that sense of home there that I think kind of gets lost in the weeds of those larger, predominantly white institutions.
Yeah, I think that's the case. But I think that we just have to get to a place, and I'm talking about Black folks with this, and this, I must say this, stop with the HBCU versus PWI stuff.
Gotta stop.
Yeah.
That's as crazy as colorism and everything else. Where you get educated is where you decide to get your education. It does not encompass the fullness of who you are and the diversity of our collective experiences. We are not a monolith, right? And we should embrace that, because I saw something trending on Twitter last night about like being Black at Mizzou or something like that.
Oh wow.
Yeah, look, there was a hashtag late last night about African American students telling their stories about, racist situations they encountered when they were there. And on one hand, you have those types of stories, but then you think about school days. What's the situation that the students run into when they go to Kentucky Fried Chicken, right, with Samuel L. Jackson?
Yeah.
So that's the interrace class antagonism that's always there. Shout out to the best movie of that type of tension in A Soldier Story. But Sergeant Waters, I'm showing my age now.
Ooh, yeah, no, the Sergeant Waters, that was a character though, man. What is his name? Adolf. What was the guy? The guy's name is like Adolf too.
Caesar.
Yeah.
Adolf Caesar, man, one of the most brilliant, amazing actors in, period. Like, even like if you go back to Color Purple and look at the scenes that he's in.
Yeah, he was a killer.
Got that gravity to him.
Yeah,
When you're in a thing, it's a rare
yeah, that
trait.
was it. But yeah, I just think that, you know, our experiences are our experiences. And as long as you're not trying to privilege them among, you know, above somebody else's, you know, that what that is what makes our collective whole all the more richer, and we all benefit from those, you know, those experiences. That, you know, as Matt already pointed out, at times when we were, you know, in our 20s, we were able to form bonds of brotherhood and friendship and community, which I think is the most important piece. Like we were at HBCU,
Yeah.
we made a campus of, you know, 25,000 or more feel like a campus of like 1,500 or 500,
Yeah.
you know, and a big part of that too. And I got to shout out the local community in Columbia, the Black community. Those brothers and sisters that worked in the dormitories, man, like Mr. Ford, who was over in what's that next to Johnson? What's the
Oh
all
man.
male dorm at the time?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
The
I know which
engineers
one.
were all there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mr. Ford was the maintenance guy, and he would always pull us to the side and say, you know, what are you young brothers doing? How class is going? And he knew when we hadn't been going to class. Everybody from that period has a Mr. Ford story, especially the folks that were older than me, about, you know, him pulling them to the side like, hey man, don't mess this opportunity up, you know. Or like the cafeteria workers, man, there were several times I had no money. I mean, not a red cent, and I ate. I never went hungry. When I lived
Yeah.
on campus and I had no money, I never went hungry. And those folks were really looking out for us, especially like around finals. It was nothing for me to walk up to that line and walk around the line. And I can't remember the sister's name, man, who used to work the cash register. She said, "Come on in, baby, come on
I
in."
know exactly who you're talking about, and it was little things like that that helped me, you know, because I was coming from a majority Black background. You know, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I went to U City. Our count in the high school was like
Oh yeah,
92% Black. You know what I'm saying? Maybe a little
yeah.
bit more in some years. It was even more Black than that. But, you know, so to
Mm-hmm.
leave that area, and, you know, I mean, I had a brief stop at Forest Park, but to leave that area and then go to Mizzou, it was like culture shock until you find the pathways into that community. And it really showed, you know, how it honestly, it really formed how a lot of I look at and what my expectations are for Black people to be able to do within larger society now. Having been
Mm-hmm.
in a very Black community and then knowing what it's like to really, really be a minority in that concentrated community with so many other things that aren't you, it's really formed a lot of my expectation now. And I think that kind of brings me, you know, fast forward a lot of years now to like where we're at right now and some of the things that we're seeing here in 2020.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we stop in 2015, 2014 era a little bit on the way here, or at least go back and forth. But it seems to me like that it, maybe everybody kind of got to a point where there was a buildup. You know, let's say you're shaking up a soda or something like that, and finally it spilled over. It seems like that buildup hit a point where finally people decided enough was enough. And this is the second or maybe third genesis of this in my life. I would say that in 92, around the Rodney King verdict and around, you know, when you started to have, you know, more or less Black Power movement and things in the early 90s. But we had a long hiatus there in between those things for some time. And now it seems like we've gotten back to it over the last half decade or so. Like, what's kind of been, you're a student of the game
Mm-hmm.
of life of being an African American man,
Mm-hmm.
and throughout time, much more than just recently. What's your take on kind of the lead up to where we're at, you know, sitting here in June of 2020?
Man, that's a really, really great, profound, and timely question. So, and it doesn't have an easy answer, right?
Right.
Where we are right now, and I've heard several of the protesters, or I should say the movement leaders that I've come to know and love from Ferguson and other places talk about this being different than that. And I think what you're dealing with is a convergence of a lot of different things, right? So in this moment, we are dealing with generations long. Some people will say decades long, but this is generations. We're talking about, you could even go and say this is hundreds of years of oppression, right? And you'll be right. But I think for our lifetimes, we're seeing decades of dehumanizing behavior coming to, you know, Howard Thurman said that, how do you provide strength and courage to those who have their backs, you know, what has Christianity said to those who've had their backs against the wall, who can find little strength to exist in the world with dignity and grace. This is not about Christianity. I'm just saying that when you have the people, the grassroots folk, pushed against the wall like that, there's going to be an explosion. You're hearing a lot about and seeing on social media, you know, the rise of the voices, you know, of the unheard, the cries of the unheard. And what we're dealing with is the convergence of all of that in this particular moment, with a particular occupant of the White House, with a particular head of the Senate that is embraced and welcoming anti-Blackness policies that continue to erode communities and leave them with nothing. Meanwhile, as funds are being taken away from certain things, police always got plenty of funding. And so they, instead of, you know, now the law enforcement are being used as the overseers on the plantations of poverty, right? In St. Louis, in Milwaukee, in Minneapolis, in St. Paul, right? New York City, right? We can go on, and that's what's happening right now. So just like when Michael Brown was murdered, it wasn't just about him, right?
Yeah.
I remember when it happened, my sister texted me and said, they finally did it. And I was like, they finally, who are we talking about? And she said, the police at first, and they finally did it. And I was like, oh, damn.
Oh, so you immediately kind of knew then when she said they did it, like the second time you really tripped off what she meant?
Yep. Without her, you know, I didn't want to think that, but like kind of like down in my spirit, you know, I was like, police, you know. And the thing is that the police, again, like I said, you know, overseers on the plantations of poverty, they are being used, as some of my colleagues have kind of pointed out on other media platforms, right? It's like a catch-all for all of the crap that happens, all of the disparities, inequities, the inequalities. The police have always been used, and we can go back, you know, to the turn of the 20th century. They were being used in that way. Almost every uprising that has occurred in the history of the last 100 years, for instance, the police were at the center of that. Police brutality was at the center of that. So, you know, Matt, to answer your question, hopefully I'm getting to it. It's we're at a place right now where, as Dr. King said, it's about, you know, coexistence or non-existence. We either are going to have to learn to live with each other and celebrate the dynamic, righteous aspects of our humanity, or, you know, we're at a turning point, you know. And I don't want to say that the American empire is now crumbling. That's not what I'm attempting to say. But we are at a place now where you could start to entertain some of those types of that kind of rhetoric, right? Because when I see some of my mentors, when I've seen folks who are part of communities, elders who are part of the, you know, the civil rights movement, Black Power movement, they're saying, I've never seen anything like this, right? You know, there's no playbook for this really in terms of tactics, but I would push back and say there is. Treat people like people.
Yeah.
And watch what can happen. I mean, we
And
were
I
talking
think,
about, yeah, go ahead,
and,
I'm sorry.
and I think to the point that you make right there, that's the part when I have these conversations with white people or with even with, you know, certain black people that want to kind of understand the depth of what we're really talking about. That's the element that gets lost most frequently is that it's not about, you know, if you haven't felt this and you haven't really truly ever felt being disenfranchised or, you know, that persistent threat that, you know, that I think that only, it seems to me more and more that only black people and definitely black males can feel, you know, just when you know you in a place and you got to look out for yourself in a different way and you got to kind of have your radar on, you don't understand how uneven it is in America. I agree with you completely, Vernon. I think that America, the entity, is at no risk of going away, but America, the establishment, is most certainly not going to endure in the way that it previously was anymore. It's impossible.
Yeah,
I think that on a bi-generational level almost, you almost have to shake this thing up. And you look through the history of America, what has happened every other generation with African Americans? We've rebelled because in one way or another, some form of oppression has gotten to a tipping point. If I go back to my great grandparents, I suppose we were right then just moving into Reconstruction at that point and have reaped the benefits of what happened at that point. My grandparents were the ones who were the adults at the point of when we're having the, having the civil rights movement. And now here we are in our generation to be that age with younger children and bringing things along.
let me throw some back to you guys just to think about context. I love giving context to things, especially historically. I would be remiss because of my training if I didn't do that. One of the things that I've been like, when I started going, like as the pandemic hit, our current pandemic, you know, going back and reading newspapers in St. Louis from 1918. And, you know, there were racial disparities there. I even went and read the CDC or the National Institutes of Health, I think NIH reports, and we were dying, if I remember correctly, at a higher rate, but segregation actually kept us from save some people's lives. It was like a different type of social mitigation at the time. And St. Louis was doing.
Wow, so segregation actually saved black people.
Yes, but when we caught the flu of 1918,
the Spanish
we
flu,
were still dying at a higher rate, right? So some of that could be attributed to the fact that living conditions, right, access to good medical care at the time. But aside from that, you know, so a little over 100 years ago, there's this pandemic that just, I mean, lays waste to the global population. Now, think about this. Tulsa, East St. Louis, Chicago. Those are places that had race riots within 2 to 3 years before or after the pandemic. My point being is that it's a little over 100 years and you got a pandemic again, and you have, social unrest predicated around the treatment and the dehumanization of Black life. Like, we're back here again. So I'm kind of circling back around, Matt, to your original question, like where we are, you know, and the quick of it is like the chickens are coming home to roost, right? In that regard, but, you know, it's nuanced, but the real part of it that has to be understood in this moment, you have to treat people with dignity and with respect. And, you know, you can accomplish amazing things. You know, America has still, in spite of itself, America has been achieved great things, right? I'm being very cautious about not saying it's been a great nation. I have no desire to live anywhere else, but I don't want to get into some kind of American exceptionalism in that way. Because if the three of us can talk about how far we removed from the institution of slavery, right? It's 4 generations for me. And now, I've been able to obtain education that, my forebears could never dream of.
Yeah.
But as I say that, I also don't have the wealth that I should have from that same situation. Right. So, and that's what I'm saying. We have to really like begin to unpack the layers here. So like the moment we're in right now, you have a pandemic, and it's exposing all of these deep-seated fissures that have created this moment, right? Anti-Black policies that are being created in these industrial centers that aren't providing access to, I'm gonna sound like I can't think of the name of the rap group, man. We're trying to get free. No, Dead Prez.
Oh, Dead Prez, yeah, their first album.
Dead
First
Prez.
album.
The first album, yeah, and that's it. Food, clothing, shelter, water, right? So are my children being educated? Am I being can I get access to good health care? Is my community have access to real food, right? I mean, if you look in St. Louis right now, North County is turning into a food desert of immense proportions.
Yeah.
Not so quietly.
Yeah.
And so my point in saying, like, so all those things that you need to be able to be your most dynamic self are being taken away from us systemically, right? So this isn't about one person or one particular cop. This is about one cop's action, right, about a week or so ago. But he's emblematic of a system that has continued to do these things. So as Kareem Abdul-Jabbar talked about, I think yesterday, or actually his op-ed last week about Colin Kaepernick, he was doing a silent protest, right? Nonviolent protest. And the irony, the sinister irony, and we fast forward to now, this is all centered around the heinous, the lynching of a brother that should still be here, right? So,
and I think that goes to the part that Target comes in that I was referencing, that I think that the vast amount of other people don't understand, is that you stand out in a crowd. Like it's almost like in a way that you imagine if you lived a life in color and everybody else was in black and white. That's how you stand out in a crowd. And if you're living your life, and what was that movie in like the 90s or 2000, Pleasantville, where everybody was in black and white, it all looked like Leave It to Beaver, and then they discovered color. Well, imagine being born into color, into a black and white world, and that's how much you stand out, and that's how much you, for don't get me wrong, for great reasons as well. There's nothing I would rather be than an African American. And when I say that, both sides of it, because I have such an appreciation for the plight that we've talked about and for the struggle we've went there, and being a part of overcoming that and trying to, do the best that I can. However, it's incredibly disheartening at times to think about the fact that, what am I in my late 30s nearly now? Yeah, I think I'm in my late 30s officially now.
You're in your late 30s, player.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. With this quarantine beard, I might be in my late 40s the way I'm looking right now. But it's caused to become disheartening to see, all right, at what point are we going to have that turning point in my life where my life is any different than my father's life? Or is it just going to be a little bit incrementally better and then a little bit better for my kid, but it's going to still be the same in America because of so many systems holding us back from being able to forge forward? And that's why I get the most insulted by your Rush Limbaugh, people like that deny white privilege, as opposed to say, hey, it's there. The people that say it's there and understand it's there, to me, that means more than somebody saying it doesn't exist and it's on you, because that's as privileged of an outlook as it gets. And I don't know if we have that same upward mobility. Sure, it's there inherently in democracy. We can do things. We're not in a caste system per se, even though, we're in a cultural caste system. But, we have the ability to rise and to do things that, our forebears didn't. But it's after they've laid their entire life down in order to create those opportunities for us to do so.
I would say, too, that I don't need to look at the numbers, right, to see about the notion of social mobility in America, like us compared to our grandparents. I think it's probably worse. It's harder, probably, I think now, to, and this is anecdotal, right? Because, and I'm just saying that from the ability to be able to create the wealth that our grandparents created, however much that was, it's still not representative of what they should have had. But I think that it's probably more difficult now, generally speaking, in America, to rise the social mobility part to rise. And for those that have historically been at the epicenter of the most harsh penalties and policies, Black folk, it's even more so, right? To be able to say, like, I want to get have as much as my parents had. And, you know, that's probably, it's probably starting to retrograde now, you know, especially with the economy. And, you know, some of this is globalization. Some of this is talking about, you know, neo-fascism, and the way it's infiltrated into the American system now in very deliberate and very overt ways. It's not subtle. I mean, we're starting to see things now that would probably make George Wallace and Barry Goldwater blush, or Jesse Helms. You know, I don't know if they could have seen some of this in their wildest dreams. My point in saying that is just that when you already have those things at play, and now you have a more interconnected global system, the ability to be able to say, okay, I mean, again, in St. Louis, taking it as an example, all of us know family members, close friends, extended kin folk, right, who may have had a high school education, but had like upper middle class income.
Yeah.
How many people do we know that are doing that now? Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Those things, you know, I remember people having parties when they found out that they got a job working on the floor somewhere at Anheuser-Busch, because it was like, that's a lifetime gig. Like, I'm good, I made it. Post office, like those things are no longer secure. And you know, working as a, you know, staff person in some kind of capacity, or a union person, and, you know, being able to buy property, own your property, and be able to use their property as the system was intended for it to. And if I go back again to your initial question, that the convergence of that property piece. So access to your property, access to being able to, like 2008 happened, who suffered the most from that? Our community did, Black community did. And
yeah, Black people did by far.
And we still haven't recovered from that.
No.
You know, you can show me Robert Smith, you can show me, you know, Kanye, he, you know, worth a couple billion now, but the majority of Black folk are not having access to the pie.
Yeah.
And the piece that we do have is being, you know, controlled to a point that you're getting less. So each successful generation is getting less and less pieces of that pie.
So I'd like to ask both of y'all this, just to kind of see where you're at with it. Obviously, the video, I think that we had three things that happened right now that contributed to jumping off point that we're at currently. You know, obviously, we can't downplay the stress and the situation that the pandemic put American life in, global life in, but really in America, the things that have happened, you know, the extreme stress that comes from that, the concern, the worry, the loss of revenue, you know, just the places put people in, you know, hungry people are hungry. People's lives that were already, you know, on the fracture point truly fell off the edge as, you know, this thing set in. But, you know, so to have the situation that happens with the young man down in Georgia and there's just an outright, you know, lynching that had been justified and had been, you know, allowed and was being upheld by the system, for people to find out about that and then have to push for the justice of that. And then to have the thing that happened with the fellow in Minnesota as well on the heels of that, I think that what, in my opinion, people got to a breaking point. They said,
well, I think Minneapolis got to that breaking point with Philando Castile too. You got to remember that was already kind of in they crawl in the city.
True. And that goes to what the bigger question I wanted to lead into with these three things that have happened in such a intense period of time. And, the exposure that people have had to it by being, sheltering in place and social distancing and not being around as much. I think that this thing happened at a time when it just was a powder keg. And we were already, that powder had been poured by all those situations, like you mentioned there, Dale. We talked about Philando Castile.
Mm-hmm.
We go back to talking about Mike Brown and all these things. People have been at a peak over the last half decade, just, on the edge and things like that. Then when these things happen, it just, boom. It was just a perfect storm to really ignite people. But what I ask with that is, both of your opinions, what happened this time that ignited so many other people outside of just the culture?
It's Trump. It's the Trump and that whole thing, man. It's like even if you look at and I don't want to disparage Barack Obama the way I say this, but it's like if you're getting in a situation, somebody like going off on you and they abusing you or whatever, and they just hit on you, but then you came from a situation before where they was kind of doing you dirty, but they would give you a kiss. So like this is more directly towards you of like, you know what, dang girl, I'm so sorry though, girl. I'm so sorry. Like kind of like the Jody and Baby Boo. I'm sorry, girl. And I kiss you. And then you got the Snoop sign like, well, bitch, sit down. I'm gonna hit on you. Like, well, dude, hold on, man. Like I gotta fight back. Jody kissed me at least after he beat me. And that's the way I think the system looked. And then it is kind of, that's my opinion, that perpetually made it worse. And then people just, and I think this Trump Orwellian thing, if it could, I think it just pushed that agenda a lot more than we know and we've seen.
What are your thoughts, Davey?
Yeah, I think we can't underscore the impact of the death of Breonna Taylor as well.
What was the sister in Texas that got ran up in her crib and shot her on accident?
Oh,
the
yeah.
one that was right after Botham.
She's with her nephew.
Yeah.
They were playing video games.
Yeah, and they shot through the window.
Yeah. And
also that brother in Dallas, too. The one that was dealing
Botham
with
John. Botham John.
Yeah.
Look how many names, like, we're talking
crazy
about. And I think that's it. Like, Matt, I think it's just the boiling point had been reached. And now that you're looking over into the abyss, like I said when I first started saying anything, it's like people's back. So that feeling that your back is against the wall and you have nothing to lose. Like Fred Hampton said, will you fight for the people? Will you live for the people? Will you die for the people? It's easy to look at folks who are organizing, mobilizing to have their First Amendment rights, actionable to create actions in the midst of a pandemic. And I heard a physician say yesterday on some news program I was happening to check out. He said, these people are like folks that you see running into a burning building to go save life. Like, why would you put your own person in jeopardy to go save life? And it kind of speaks back to that Fred Hampton quote, will you die for the people? People are willing to die for the people. What time is the curfew? Bet I'm there. Because it's reached that point. You call National Guard, I'm there. Now, at the same time, as I'm saying that, I understand that there are infiltrators, enemies, who are trying to use this moment to co-opt it, but that's always been the case.
Mm-hmm.
Malcolm,
COINTELPRO,
Ella Baker, COINTELPRO didn't die because J. Edgar Hoover passed away.
What's so interesting, have you seen a minister's speech where he talks about, he says, like, if you notice, the CIA revved up more after the Berlin Wall went down. He correlated. I was like, man, okay. I had never even thought about that being a possibility of, things covertly going more into the hood, or just in the U.S. when the Berlin Wall came down and basically the fall of Russia. That you had more that you could do internally instead of worry about the external, what was going on. We already got if the Cold War is over, we got everything else good. Now we can focus on what's going on in the U.S.
Well, that honestly makes a lot of sense.
It does.
Let's go back to the 60s. In the early 60s, obviously, you know, throughout that entire time, the 60s until recently, I think, that was the peak of we fed up as Black people. 60s, you know, we're just like, nah, this isn't gonna work. We gonna go to the point. Like a lot of the heroes of civil rights that we still quote and we still bring up, I think almost to an excess almost. And I'll explain why in a second. Are all from the 60s. Well, the 60s get further away every day. Every day we're getting further away from the 60s, but we're still utilizing and leveraging a lot of the people from that time to form our worldview now, one that's changed, one that's gotten more intensely focused on that oppression that our race faces, you know, at a level and in a way that nobody else faces in this country. So why aren't we having our leaders that we're looking to and the people that are mobilizing our worldview and the things that we emulate? Why isn't that evolving in the same way that the resistance against us is? Because I think while the principles of Malcolm and Martin and Fred and everybody from back in those days still stand up, we got to have some evolution here and about how we're going to look at those things and how we're going to attack them on this side too.
I think that this further exposes the crisis that we're in, that those of us who do find ways to get through, to leverage our educations, our experiences, our own class privileges to enjoy some semblance of the promise that America's supposed to be.
The fake victory lap that we went on.
Yeah,
that's the 1980s in my book. In the 1980s, we celebrated a whole lot of shit that we hadn't won yet.
That 90s too. Don't get it twisted. That 92 to 96 period too.
Well, but at least we woke up in the 90s though, and we had some awareness to it. Like there was more cultural awareness in the early 90s. I think we took the 80s off.
I don't know that we've ever taken any time off per se, but and King points this out too, right? In his last book, Where Do We Go From Here? Chaos or Community? Like that we can't allow time to become, you know, our adversary because we think we won a battle. Like the Civil Rights Acts are passed. That's not the end. Anti-Blackness didn't go anywhere. They're like, hey, I'm still here. Here I am. But what has happened is that policies and very subtle, sinister plans have been laid to destroy our communities and destroy the pathways we had to empowerment. And those same things have been turned around and become pathogens for our socio-political and economic, destroying our health of our communities, right? You know, I don't want to say cancer, but it's just like a different type of virus. And I think that the problem that we continually face is how do we leverage those things for the greatest good? We talk about it, but the seduction of not having to actually do anything, especially when we have, you know, these devices, these mobile devices now, right? Once this moment ends, how much organizing and mobilization will people still be doing?
Oh, thank you, V. I appreciate you saying that because now you've went to the thing that I'm the most passionate about on earth right there.
Mm-hmm.
What we're doing, two things right there. What we're doing with these mobile devices, I think, has been the biggest gift and the curse to mobilization for Black people. On one hand, I don't think that we're seeing that racism is any less prevalent or any less violent than it's been at any other point. It's seen by more people now. Because I see so many people that say that they're shocked by, you know, racism and look at these things. And that statement blows me away. Because for me, I see these things and I say, boy, this just looks a lot like growing up and a lot of the things that people went through and the things that were happening in the world, not just domestically around me, but everywhere, the Black people all over the place. But I think for some reason we weren't as locked in on it. So when I say things like we took the 80s off, it's a bit tongue in cheek. Because obviously, obviously we had some great voices emerge from the 80s that took shape in that age and really gave birth to like that. I look at it almost like a Harlem Renaissance type period when you had Spike Lee's movies blowing up in the early 90s and you had things like the Nation of Islam that were getting overdue credit for being able to speak that Black voice and things like that weren't.
Forget about hip hop.
No, not at all. And that's exactly where I was about to go next, because you had
Tongues.
you had rap come out of the 80s and had its 80s voice, and then had a different voice in the 90s already. I mean, so many things happened for us that stirred up in the 80s that took full shape in the 90s and already had their roots in, during that time. So I don't mean, I say that tongue in cheek to say we took the 80s off, but I think that during that period of time, even into the 90s, until things like social media and cameras and video phones and things like that became more prevalent over the last 10 to 15 years, people didn't see it as much. And therefore, it didn't have as much of a shocking, even, I don't think it's short to sell it to say traumatic effect on us like things have had of late. I mean, look at all those pictures of all those people that, that we look at, that we've mentioned a lot of their names here. There's so many more we could mention. But the vast majority of those people from the last 5 years, but you cannot tell me that violence against people that has been perpetuated by police took some unforeseen hike in the last 5 years alone. That stuff's been going on way through that time. We just didn't see it as much. But now that it's more visible, that's one strength of social media. But on the other side of it, I think there's a whole lot of people that have gotten active through social media and leave it right there. That posting that video or sharing that message is enough, but we don't have as many people going out and doing the deed. And that's what bothers me the most of anything else, because what are we doing to really speak about these issues and act on them other than posting and reacting?
Well, actually, you know what? I'm gonna actually speak for V on this. He actually educated me on this coming up. I'm actually going. As a great Pastor Troy said, sit back while the pastor preach. I'm actually. I listened to him one time. He told he told me the story, and V could probably even explain it more. He's telling me the story of Martha King and the Montgomery boycotts, and how it wasn't as sweet as we think it is, though, because we've dramatized it. We've made it this heroic thing. And he was like, it was real beef. He said it was real beef that bringing in Martin to be this person. He said it was two churches. Am I right, V? Like it was two churches, like one basically in the hood, one for the folks that had a little paper, right?
Yeah, I mean, so Dexter Avenue Baptist Church, that's what King was.
Yeah. So, and basically saying like this guy's gonna lead, and they was like, I don't know. We don't know, but everyone's role in a movement to a certain extent. Like I agree with you 100%, Matt. But at the same time, there's different roles within the movement.
Oh, absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
I can't tell nobody their role, but I do want people to do more individually. But I also want people that's got some paper to drop off more duffel bags at some of these community centers that are doing a thing. Just drop off cash. You ain't got to say it's from you. Nobody's got to even know. Drop off $100,000, no cash at the Ujama Center. That's out there doing their thing. That's kind of my thing, and V can kind of explain more of what I was kind of like, that story real quick. I know V got to get out here in a minute, but
yeah, I do have to run. We have to be as committed and show that same type of energy that we do with our thumbs, that we do with our feet, in getting to places like, for instance, banks that are going to give loans to our entrepreneurial brothers and sisters, give access to funds to a youth center, give access funds to an elderly couple that wants to improve their home, right? And you can talk about FHA loans and stuff, right? At that point, in economics behind this moment, because I don't want to say, I hope you show that same energy you did with your tweeting and IG posts that you do in terms of coming out to the protest.
Yeah, that's the wrong.
That's not for everybody. That's not for everybody.
Right. Right.
Maybe your thing is like, hey, I got some access to relationships in the economic sector. I have access to relationships in other sectors that are desperately needed. But do something, right? I think that's probably what you're getting at. But because right now the easy thing to see materialize instantaneously, right, is the social media post, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, etc. But what do you do in the long term to sustain that? The old labor leader Tony Benn in England always quote, he had, my paraphrase, that the people who lay outside the protection of democracy must always be vigilant about their participation in said democracy. because the people that are controlling the purse strings, or like the marionettes, they aren't checking for us. If we don't force them to acknowledge our existence and to be treated equitably and fairly and equally, they're not going to do it. Douglas talks about power concedes nothing without a demand. It never has and never will. It's the same thing now. And so I think what we're dealing with is that how do we take that Baldwinian rage, right, to love America, right, this place that our forebears helped to create, and take that rage and channel it into mobilization, into education, into organization that will make our children and grandchildren, right, beneficiaries of a better American experiment. Not just an experiment in capitalism, but an experiment in humanity, an experiment in our best selves. And for me, in spite of my rage, in spite of my anger and my profound sadness, when I look at my children, when I look at my niece and my nephew, I look at the fourth generation in my family since the Great Migration. That's where I get my hope from, right? There are times I get disillusioned. There are times where we all feel beat down because I'm human. But I'd be remiss if I didn't say that there's still something in me when I see the youth in my family, the youth in the community around the places I grew up in St. Louis, that makes me want to adhere to that fight all the more for them.
Yeah.
And it's not for the world that we see currently, but the world we should see, that we should be, we should be in. And yeah, man, we can't give up. But we got to hold each other accountable, man. We have to, everybody got to be iron sharpening iron, man. We got to be that, man. Thank you, brothers, for the opportunity.
Yeah.
Man,
V, where can everybody hit you up at, though, man?
You can see me at VC Mitchell Jr. On Twitter, and that's pretty much it.
Yeah, I already know. I'm surprised you didn't do your other new foray into social media, but it's all good.
Oh man, I did that. That's just
No. I appreciate that. No, because we can do our thing over there. So I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
Hey, V, thank you, brother, for this. Thank you for everything else, man. Down the road.
We got to bring him back, man.
Together.
We're going to have the pastor preaches section, man. We got to bring him back.
Yeah. I want to come back, man. Not just when something is crazy, but
yeah, we're gonna have a whole thing because he wanted to come on when Kobe had passed, man. That was the first time. Actually, that was the first time he was supposed to come on. It was when Kobe had passed.
That was a tough night.
That's his guy. That's his guy.
Hey, can you believe that happened this year too? That feels like 5 years ago.
I know. For real, it feel like, man, because when you think about it, his memorial, his service, right? You can't do that right now.
As some conspiracy people say, if Trump would have got everything in order, Kobe would be alive if we had locked down the country earlier.
No. we don't need to fall down that. We don't need to fall down that hallway too.
Hey man. Blessings and peace to you, brothers, man. Love y'all, man.
Thank you, brother.
All right now.
All right.
Peace.
Respect.